Let's talk a little bit about some of the key points to consider when a company is implementing an innovation strategy. And I know things like disruptive innovation or the word disruption, which is a very troubling term if it's used out of context. But Rob, take us down the path of disruption and how that impacts the organization for the good or the better.
This notion of disruption comes from Clayton Christensen at Harvard. And Clay had a fundamental insight, which was really revolutionary in the innovation space at the time. And that was while a lot of companies, established incumbent players, end up getting zoomed by the brand new things that come from entrepreneurial companies, it's not that he said that they weren't paying attention, because for the most part they were. It's not that he said that they were big, dumb, and stupid. It was in many cases because the incumbent was doing what they were supposed to be doing, which is taking care of their current core customers.
That success factor, success pond you were talking about
Right,
before.
Focus on their customers. And so when a disruptive technology or a disruptive innovation comes out, it's a very specific kind of problem. It either comes from the low end, so it has a lower performance quality relative to what's already in the market, or it has a much higher performance quality and it comes in at a much higher price. But in either case, you're actually targeting different customers. So often customers who are underserved or overserved by the other products or not served at all, now you have a much cheaper solution. So you're selling to the customers that the incumbents weren't paying any attention to. And so what the marketplace tells us, what the analysts say was, look, you're in these nice high margin products here with the higher quality customers. Forget about that low quality junk that new competitor just came out with. Let them have all the low quality stuff. You stick to what you do well. The problem is, the reason why it's disruptive is as that new entrant comes in with the quote unquote lower quality, they actually have some other factor that they're serving better for that new customer segment. And as they learn, they become better and better at doing what they're doing, and eventually they're good enough for your core customers. They're good enough sometimes for all of your core customers, and they're doing it cheaper, maybe they're doing it faster, maybe they're doing it differently, and that's why it's disruptive.
But it sounds to me like that's, if I am that incumbent in the space, and I decided we're focusing on the Fortune 1000, we're going to leave the SMB market to somebody else, and it's small potatoes.
Right.
Are you saying that I now need to broaden that scope from the get-go and say, no, I've got to look at a holistic view of the entire market?
Well, absolutely you need to keep an eye on it. And sometimes that's all for a while, so you know when you're ready. But you also have to think about, when is the time when I need to disrupt myself? When is the time when I need to build a new business that might compete with some of my core businesses? And I'll tell you, this is a very, very difficult problem. I just want to underscore again that disruptive innovations are relatively unique. Again, a lot of the innovation we see in the marketplace is not technically a disruptive innovation, but those that are much more difficult for incumbent companies to deal with.
Can you give us what you consider one of your best examples of disruptive innovation and how that worked out, how it started, and the result of that?
Sure. So this is the classic one that Clay uses all the time, and it's steel manufacturing. So the big integrated mills, those are very expensive, capital-intensive operations. And back in the 60s, we started to have what were called mini mills, because they're a lot smaller, they're a lot cheaper. The way they manufactured steel, rather than taking iron ore from the ground and coking coal and heating it up and melting stuff down and smelting, doing all this stuff that you do to make steel, they took scrap steel, melted it down, and created new steel. Okay. So they cut out a whole lot of the early process. This is a very different manufacturing process. It takes different equipment, different approach, process, etc., to make steel, and it's a lot cheaper. Now, when Nucor and some of these other mini mills came into the market in the 1960s, they were serving the lowest end of the market, which is reinforcing bar, rebar it's called. They weren't able, the technology was not able to produce high-end alloy steels that might go into aeronautical applications or even the stuff that you use in your car. So U.S. Steel and Bethlehem Steel and all those companies, some of which don't exist anymore, looked at this and they said, well, that's the junk, low margin. We can't compete cost for cost with mini mills. We'll let them have it. And you know what? The stock market analysts said the same thing. And so they got rid of that. Well, over time, the mini mills got better and better. They figured out how to make higher quality steel, and eventually they were able to make almost all of the grades of steel that the integrated mills make. And this is a large part of the reason why in the 70s, not the only reason, but 70s and 80s, the steel industry became almost a moribund industry.